Tonight, we are pleased to have Nate Daniels, Executive Director of the Greater Peninsula Conservancy. He will discuss Great Peninsula Conservancy's conservation initiatives. These provide a framework for preservation of the most significant and threatened landscapes in Great Peninsula. GPC has already protected over 10,500 acres of ecologically important lands and waters, but there is much more to be done. Nate has dedicated himself to conserving ecologically valuable lands on the Great Peninsula since he joined GPC as Executive Director in 2019. And it hasn't been that long, and you have done a tremendous amount of work, Nate. I'm so impressed. He has over a decade of experience in nonprofit management with a focus on public lands and holds a master's degree in environmental science. Nate knows that our region is an extraordinarily beautiful and special place, and that as stewards, it is our responsibility to protect the land and the native wildlife that we call home. He believes our children and all future generations should have opportunities to connect with the natural world. Nate knows that the best way to get things done is through collaboration, and is ready to work with the community members who want to preserve the habitat and protect biodiversity. When he's not at his keyboard, you'll find Nate and his partner Kim out sauntering through the forest, field guides and binoculars at the ready. And please welcome Nate Daniels.
How's that look? Look good. All right. Hey, thank you very much, Lynn, for the introduction, and it's a real pleasure to be here. So I'm going to get right at it here and tell you a little bit about the community conservation work that we're doing to help protect the lands that we have here in our region. But before I get started, it's important to acknowledge the fact that our region, the whole Kitsap Peninsula area, all the way down to Gig Harbor, is the traditional land of actually 6 tribes, all of whom we work very closely. So the Suquamish tribe, Squaxin Island, Port Gamble, Squamish, Skokomish, Puyallups, and the Nisqually tribes, all sovereign nations, all good friends of ours, and really partners in conservation. So our mission statement, I usually don't even talk about our mission statement. What I like to say is our mission is to protect the most ecologically valuable lands. And our mission statement is much more wordy than that, so I don't even say that one. This is what we do. We do it to protect habitat for wildlife, and we do it to provide areas for people to connect to nature. Really, when you boil down our mission, that is what we do. So the organization itself was founded in, well, it was a merger of 4 different land trusts, right? So some of these earlier land trusts, like Kitsap Land Trust, started back in the 80s. Some of the others came in the mid 80s, 90s. But each one of these 4 land trusts, Peninsula Heritage, which was down in Gig Harbor, Key Peninsula, Kitsap Land Trust, sort of in our area, Indianola, right up north, and the Hood Canal, clearly. You know where that's at. Those were all independent, and they were run by volunteers, and they didn't have professional staff, and they got a lot of work done. But those 4 land trusts realized that they would probably be able to do more if they conglomerated and put all of their membership dollars together and hired some staff. They did that, and it was a good decision. Might be biased, but it's been working really well since then. So that's kind of the history. So we go back into the 80s, but really when we think about when we founded, it was 2000. When you talk about Great Peninsula Conservancy, and where we work is this whole area, and our name is a weird one, right? And nobody can get it right. Everybody thinks it's Greater Peninsula or whatever. So we usually say GPC, but the reason why it's called Great Peninsula is if you see that nautical map over there on what is my left, your right, that is an old map from, that one's from the 19th century. But, the idea here is on some of the earlier maps, it was called Great Peninsula. And so it was a good compromise name when you couldn't find a good name for such a large region. And since then, we realized that there was no land trust in this region either, but there were some real opportunities for conservation on this area. So there's some other land trusts in the region, like Jefferson Land Trust is here, this Quality Land Trust is here, Capital Land Trust. So there's a lot of regional land trusts that are doing a lot of good work. But there was a blank spot down around Shelton, and then the what we call the Great Bend here with Skokomish area. And so we've recently started to do a lot more work down here because nobody else was doing it. And there's a lot of reasons why it's a good place to do work, mostly because land values are still like you can get a lot of bang for your buck down there. So basically in the region, you know, we have a big region with a lot of people, and our membership fluctuates every year, but I would say on average, we're about 1,000 people who are considered members. And membership just means you're giving some amount of money. It could be $1 or it could be $100,000. You know, it doesn't matter. Either way, you're a member of the organization, and everybody's meaningful. And you know, everybody, it really does matter. So why do we do this work? Like, why do we care about conservation? Well, right now, every year, about 3,200 people are moving into just Kitsap County. I'm not talking about the whole region. This is not Pierce County or Mason. Kitsap County, 3,200 folks on average are coming in each year. And so just in last year, and this is last year during, you know, not a great economic year. In 2021, we had a pandemic. There were still, you know, thousands and thousands of permits pulled, and those are all for new development, new structures. And that means a lot of conversion from open space, green spaces to housing. And I'm not picking on Arborwood down here. There's nothing wrong with that development. They, you know, they're as good as the next development. But I was recently out there and stopped and just looked and saw, wow, that is right next to North Kitsap Heritage Park. That got platted out. So you could put 750 houses on it, and that is what's happening there. It could have been expanding the parkland. There are some natural resources there that would be kind of cool to protect, but that one's a loss, right? And so we actually negotiated to try to buy that, but by the time it was platted and the county had had agreed to that platting, well, the prices go through the roof, because now instead of like one unit for every 20 acres. Now you got and each 20 acres, you got dozens of units. All I got's money. So that one's a loss, but that doesn't mean there's still tons of opportunities, like literally thousands of acres that we can protect. And we're not against development. We know people need places to live, and this is a great place to live. Like, we all moved here, right? Like, none of us, like, I wasn't born here, so it'd be hypocritical for me to be like, oh, you know, all these people are coming in here. No. But people are coming, that's happening. We know there's places people need. They need to live someplace. So we're not against development. What we want to do is we focus not about anti-development. We're focusing on protecting those most ecologically valuable places. And that means places like shorelines, salmon streams, and then healthy upland forests. That's what we really care about. And so, and then, you know, what else? Why do we care? Well, we have this character, and one of the reasons why we all love living here is because of the natural beauty. I would suspect, and you know, there's a lot of folks here. I mean, does anybody like one of the main reasons why you live here is because of the natural beauty of the area and you care about it? Does anybody care about it? Yeah. So I think, okay, yeah, it's like everybody thinks that's true. Kind of goes without saying. I mean, that's like a big reason why we live here. Well, the problem with a lot of rampant development that's not structured is you lose a lot of habitat. And what that means is the actual absolute number of wildlife individuals, not to mention just species, decreases. And it changes the character of where we live. Our home will become something different. You know, it wouldn't be too crazy to think that in 50 years or maybe 100 years, when you look at a map and you see the gray of Seattle, and because it's all urban, it wouldn't be hard to imagine that that's what this is going to look like. We are seeing massive development. So let's protect some of those spaces, and let's try to protect as much of that habitat as we can right now. So little birds, you know, like the juncos, have a place to lay their eggs and live. And I will just point out one thing that nobody's talking about right now, and I cannot find anything on it on the internet, but this is a thing that's coming up right now. Is places like this, these are wetlands, right? And so we care about protecting the wetlands. Wetlands are protected right now under federal law because of the Clean Water Act. Clean Water Act's been 51 years old. Last year is 50 years. Well, right now there was a Supreme Court case being heard that it was heard last fall in October, and it is basically a couple who lives in Idaho filled in a wetland, and they wanted to build their house there. The EPA was like, "Hey, you can't just fill in wetlands. There's rules. These are the waters of the United States. You can't do that." And they were like, "Yeah, I can. It's my right." And so that's in the Supreme Court right now. They're saying, "My land, my right. I'll do whatever I want." And then that's against the Clean Water Act. So there's a good chance come this summer, the protections the Clean Water Act provide for wetlands and that are so critically important for habitat, those protections that I've been taking for granted since my entire life, they might not be there. It's strangely being quiet. That court case is called Sackett versus EPA, and keep your eye on that. But the point being here is even these lands that we take for granted that are in Kitsap County that are protected by state law, federal law, we are trying to buy these now from willing landowners because we are just doubling down on protecting areas that matter most ecologically. So, and by the way, if anybody has any questions or thoughts during this, you feel free to just jump in. I'm not like, anything's fine with me.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to do all this purchasing and it's getting way more expensive, where are you getting the money?
Yeah, I'll get in. That's a good question. So the question was, where do you get the money to buy all this land? And that is an excellent question. I'm going to talk about it in just a few slides, but you're right on there. And so the last thing I'll say about why we do this work and why conservation matters is because people are sadder than they used to be. We're in these urban areas. This is like statistically proven. I don't know. What happens is people get into these places where you ruminate on things. So rumination means like you keep thinking about the same problem over and over again, but you're not coming up with new solutions. You're just thinking about this problem. You're not like, there's no movement. Believe me, I do it all the time. This is the thing that causes me to lose sleep. Well, I think this happens to almost all of us. Studies have shown that if you go out and spend some time in nature, you'll break that rumination, and it can be very helpful for you. You don't even have to walk. You don't have to do anything. Just going into green space has been scientifically shown to reduce your stress and break that rumination that's happening. I could go into the whole detail, like the picture of the brain that's over there. The idea here is that there was a study in 2016. This study showed that section of your brain is lit up. So what they did was they injected a bunch of people with radioisotopes. Which I'm not doing that study, but it goes into your brain, and your brain's part lights up that you're thinking about. So people are ruminating. They're thinking about the same thing. They're worried about it. Well, some people went out into an urban area and did a 90-minute walk and came back, and they threw them back in the MRI machine. They're still active, thinking, ruminating, same thing. People who went out in the green space for 90 minutes and came back, they're calmer, and it's shown that area of your brain was not lighting up. So the thing about that is everybody knows, like, you just kind of feel it. You go out in the nature, and I don't know about you, but when I come back, I just feel better. Every time, no matter what, I always feel better. But you can also quantitatively show that this is real. We don't want to lose these places. We want them to be protected. That way we can all be healthier, and then there's wildlife too. So all that said, what do we do? And then there's three things. So I usually talk about like three pillars, very like Greek theory. I'm also thinking maybe that we should talk about like three big trees or so. I don't know, but I'm still working on like metaphor here, but basically there's three things that we do. We do conservation, which for us means actively protecting lands. Then once we protected those lands, well, we need to steward them, right? We need to take care of those lands. And third, and more importantly to us organizationally, is to connect people to those lands because of all the things I just talked about, not to mention, just making sure that people continue to care and that the next generation care. So connecting people to nature is more and more important to us. So those are the three things that we do. There's a fourth thing, but it's like a little thing. And that's, we act as a fiscal sponsor for several organizations. I'll mention that a little bit. So to date, the thing that you read, Lynn, was a little outdated. We had a real bumper year last year. We've closed on 12 properties. It was like $10 million that we ran through, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But, by doing that, we protected a whole bunch more acres. So we're up to just about 11,400. That's the actual number right now. It's like 11,500-ish. And that's made up of a whole bunch of different kind of things. Mostly like for us, things we care about: shorelines, salmon streams, and then these upland forests that are in good shape, particularly. But we'll take any forest land kind of if it's redeemable. There's some areas that have like Camp Wesley Clark, but we're interested in it. But boy, if we go in there, it's going to be like you got to mitigate there's bombs, shells, and lead everywhere. So it's like those are a little more challenging. So we got some, and we don't take everything. We don't take like little 2-acre parcels because the amount of staff time that goes into buying one of those, it takes days and hours of staff time. You get way more bang for your buck doing projects that are bigger. So we do have selective criteria that we go through, which can be off-putting to some people, but we just are trying to do the best we can. Yeah. So 10-acre parcel would be one of those kind of on the cusp. So the question is, what if somebody wants to donate 10 acres? And what we would do is we do a conservation values evaluation. So there's a lot of things. So we would look at it and we say, does this have conservation value? So if it's 10 acres of wetland, then we would probably take it as a donation. And what's also kind of can be off-putting to people is not only will we take your land, but we'll also ask you to make a stewardship contribution to us, money. And I know, and that's people are like, wait, I'm going to give you land and you want money. Like, yeah, because we have an obligation to protect it forever. And so, but here's the thing with that is we've become more savvy in the last few years. And now we have a bunch of people we can go to. So if somebody wants to donate a piece of land and it has conservation value, then what we'll do is we still need a stewardship conservation. So we need a stewardship contribution. So for something like 10 acres, we're looking for like $20,000 cash to go into a fund that's invested in the market. And then that means the money that investment produces over time will help us make sure that we can protect the land. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we don't have to necessarily get it from the landowner. We can go to other people in the community who have resources and say, there's something really important. Would you like to help make this happen? Because, they're going to donate it, but they don't have the resources to like throw $20,000 on top of it. And so we can cobble together deals, basically. It's a lot of land transactions. Yeah. So the question was, would that go? So the question is, would if you donated a piece of land to us as a land trust, would that mean that the property would then be open to the public? And each one of the preserves is different. So some are protected and reserved for just for habitat for wildlife. And some are we let the public on, and we have trails. We encourage people to come on. So each one's different, and that would be a negotiation with the landowner. I mean, some of them are just not conducive to allowing people to come on them because there's no parking lot, there's no trails. If it's just full of water and shrubs, it's like that's not a good one. So we just say, just stay out of this one. You can go on some of these other ones. So every property is different. Every negotiation is different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
You pay taxes.
So the question there is, do we pay property taxes on the land that we own? And you got something you're wandering around. Okay, I was just like, yeah, I didn't know if I was quiet or something. Do we pay property taxes on the preserved land? No. Well, we almost never pay property tax on preserved land because what we do is we put it into a special status that the state recognizes. It's called conservation. Got to be a conservation organization to put it in that status, but basically it means that it comes off the tax rolls, which county commissioners love. But what it does, we don't pay tax on it, and that's really important for us because we are going to own these properties in perpetuity. This is a very long time. You multiply any amount of money times perpetuity, and it's like infinitely expensive. So having them come off the tax rolls is really important for us to protect them. And then that's further protection. So there's some restrictions on what we can do when they're in conservation, as in we can't develop them, we can't subdivide them, we can't sell them off. We have obligations with that tax status. So no, we try to not pay tax. I will say, every once in a while, somebody will donate a property to us that's like in an urban area, like a house in Bremerton, for instance. we'll get that. Somebody will say, you know, they'll put us in their will, and whether we know it or not, they'll say, here's my house, it's worth $300,000, and I don't have an heir to give it to. Well, that we would pay tax on it, but what we'll end up doing with those kind of properties is we'll sell it on the market, and then what we'll do is take that revenue from it and put it right into protecting some other property, right? So it goes right to the conservation mission. So for a while we hold it, we would pay tax on that.
But that goes back to her question.
Yes, let me get to that. So there's three ways we do land protection. We do fee simple acquisitions, so that means we actually buy the land. We do conservation easements. I'm gonna talk about that. We assist agencies, which are like parks departments. So when it comes to fee simple acquisitions, this is how we get the money. We write tons of grants. Okay, so there's federal grants, state grants, local, like county grants. For instance, Pierce County has a thing called Pierce County Conservation Futures. There's a bunch of money in that. And Pierce County, and we have it in Kitsap County too. It's just that in Pierce County, there's a competitive grant cycle that they've developed. Kitsap County, the county commissioners just say, Viola, you know, like, voila, we will make, you will protect this. So they hold the power on Kitsap County Conservation Futures, but we just write grants. And so, for instance, Misery Point, this we protected in 2019. You're out there. And this cost, the purchase price for this was $1.6 million for the tip of this. This is ecologically valuable because there's eelgrass beds down here. Forage fish, the little fish that salmon eat, live in these eelgrass beds. And so this is important, right? To make sure that we have killer whales still swimming around because they eat the salmon, right? So we wrote a $1 million National Coastal Wetlands grant. So that went through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then we wrote a $600,000-ish grant to the state. And there's all these different state pools of money. And we're really good at doing this stuff. So we know where the money is and which grants we should go for which projects. And we have a really good track record of bringing the money into our region. So we cobbled together a couple different grants there. Plus there was a couple $100,000 actually that came from the Navy. Actually, there's a program that the Navy have, which is called the REPI program, which is Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program. It's Navy, so it's got to have like a huge name. And you know, we put it all together and then we can buy this and protect it. And then when we do that, those grants also come with strings attached to them. So this area had 7 or 8 development rights. So you could have had 7 or 8 houses here, but through that acquisition, those development rights are extinguished. And so they're gone. That's fine with us because we never wanted to build anything on it anyway. But that also means that now the Army Corps of Engineers, every few years, they're looking at us and they're like, did you build anything there? No, you didn't. Okay, you're still compliant. And we say, we're compliant. And then that's just how it is forever. The federal government's always going to be watching us to make sure we don't like do anything nefarious on this, which we're not going to. But you know, that's how we do it. So that the money comes from grants for the most part. Now we also recently we purchased 100 acres up in the Hansville area, like way up north. That was $2 million, and every one of those dollars came from the community. There was no grants. It was like people just wrote us $20 checks, $50 checks. One guy wrote an $800,000 check, so that was nice. But you know, you put it all together, you get $2 million, and so you know we noticed there's ways to do this from basically, and they take years. Like to go through one of these, it will take 2 to 3 years to move through the process, and the whole time there's a staff person plus me and plus a director with it. We negotiate. There's a million problems. They always have problems. There's never been one that's been easy, but eventually, once you own it, it's protected. Right. And I'm gonna move a little faster because otherwise we'll be here all night. So it's kind of interesting to see, like we bought this one in 2019, we bought this one last year. That's the McDermott Point. That's down tip of Key Peninsula. It's almost as far south there. And this used to be for those of you, there's like the sandy part on the picture on the right, kind of the upland grassy field. That used to be a lagoon, just like the picture at Misery Point. So this is an opportunity for restoration as well. So we can put that back, and that's a wonderful piece of habitat. Okay, the next thing we do is conservation easements. This is another way for somebody who had a piece of property that wanted to protect it, to protect their land. Every piece of land in America has got a bunch of rights associated with it. So that could be, you know, the right to develop it, the right to subdivide the property. Sometimes you have timber rights, sometimes you have water rights, et cetera, mineral rights. Not every piece of land's got all those rights, but a lot of them have those kinds, especially the open space. Well, with a conservation easement, we can either buy those rights from you, or you can donate them to us. And then those rights are then extinguished. So for instance, Taukiki Farm, this is bottom Great Peninsula, 140-ish acres. We paid these people $980,000 and they still own the farm. And the only thing that happens is now they can't subdivide this and they can't sell it in chunks and they can't develop it. So they want to keep it in farm. So we just paid them almost $1 million. And now they can still transfer the property to their kids. They own it. But we watch them now forever to make sure that they don't violate the easement. And that money came from the county and it came from the state. And so an easement means basically we come to an agreement, we extinguish some of your rights, or we hold those rights, and then you can't do those things anymore. And then that travels with the deed. So subsequent landowners, when they buy it, when they get their title report, it'll say, yeah, be careful because this thing's got restrictions on it. And, you know, because what happens is something like this will sell in the market and they'll be like, there's a screaming hot deal for that much land. And then they look at it and like, oh, well, we can't divide it up into 5-acre sections and sell it. So that's why it's such a good deal, is because it's got conservation easement. But we like conservation easements. I kind of personally don't like them as much as just buying the land, because when you buy it, you know you own it and you have the control over it. I do appreciate that. Whereas this, they'll sell it to somebody else, and then maybe that person doesn't understand, or maybe they don't pretend like they don't understand, and then you end up with issues. And then what we do is we have, you know, where that money, the money I said we put away, we squirrel away. Well, we use that money to sue them and make sure that we get the rights back and make sure that they put the land back in the position where it needs to be. That's not a very fun part of the job, honestly, but we do it because that's what we do. So anyway, conservation easements are great. That picture up there is in Gig Harbor. There's a 200-acre forest land a woman owns who lives out there. She put the easement on. She donated it, multi-million-dollar easement. She gave it to us. We hold it, and you know, and she can't subdivide it. It's just got to stay forest land, because she cared about the forest. So, you know, ways to do things. And again, so the third thing is agency assist. So with that is we help our park partners, for the most part, buy land. So this is an example. This is Samuel Homestead Park, also in the Gig Harbor. This has got the part that's got the active ball field and stuff. That's not inside the conservation easement, but all the forest land that's around there, the trails, those are all protected. So the park department cannot put in more ball fields in Samuel, which I'll tell you, they kind of would like to, but they can't. And so we enforce that conservation easement against or on our park partners as well. And, you know, that's what it is. And so we work closely with the counties. And sometimes like there's a 40-acre piece that's like down here in Samuel. And this morning I was down talking to a landowner. They want to sell it. We're going to write some grants for the Parks Department. If we get it, we'll buy the land, and then when instead of us taking the deed, we'll right at the time when we pay them the money, we'll assign the property to Penn Met Parks. And so Penn Met Parks will own it and we'll go into the Parks Department. We won't add it to our land at all, but we'll have helped them protect 40 acres of really nice habitat. So we call that an assist. Like we're right. Sorry? Well, in that particular case, we would want to put a conservation easement on it. We wouldn't have to, but I think with this, because we already have a conservation easement that's adjacent to it, we would kind of insist that if we're going to go through this, here's the thing about that is though, we're going to use money that already has restrictive covenants, they're called, on it. So we don't even need necessarily a conservation easement, because the county will have basically a conservation easement. Or in that case, Pierce County would have a conservation easement over the parks part. It gets very complicated, but I like having the easement where we control it too, because then we just know that there's no shenanigans. Because you get a group of county commissioners 50 years from now, they may have a different theory on the way things. So yes, we probably would put a conservation easement on that. And we just are starting to talk with those folks. So it'll be about 2 or 3 years before that one's done. Seriously, it's gonna they just take forever. So okay, move. I get all sidetracked. Thanks for the questions, but move through. Okay. This gives you an idea of the kind of the geography of the projects we're working on right now. We have about 12 projects that are active. Like I said, last year we closed on a record 12 projects. That's a lot. And the good thing is we have 3 staff people who are professionals, who are really highly skilled, who do all the negotiations. They write the grants, they manage the grants, they close the deals, and then they flip it over to our stewardship team. Ton of work. But really smart people. Then, once we either own the land or we own the easement, then what they do is they close it in one part of our server on our computer system, and they give it to the other team. That's the stewardship team, and the stewardship team then takes care of that land forever. And the stewardship team is also 3 people. We have just about 60 conservation easements and about 60 preserves that we own. That gives you an idea. That's a lot, right? And they're spread out all over that area. So we have to take care of each one of those. Every year we have to go out and monitor to make sure if we own them outright, then the neighbors cut the trees down, or they dump in garbage and cars. We get cars, tires. We got to clean all that stuff up and everything else. So, but we basically what we'll do is a baseline report when we buy the property, or we put the easement on it. Either way. This is Chico Creek. The Suquamish tribe actually owns this piece of land, but we hold conservation easement over it. So each one of these points, we take a bunch of photographs, and then we write the situation there. And then every year we go back and we document whether or not there's been a change there. And through that process, we can defend in court if we need to, if somebody violates an easement. So, yeah, and then we manage the properties if we own them. Okay, so can you, like, I'm gonna try to go faster. I get excited talking about this. I know it's kind of boring, but we do a lot of different things to take care of the land. We like I said, monitor them every year, and then we restore them. And really what this comes down to is people helping to do these things. We're also what we're trying to do now is be thinking about climate change, and then making our preserves more resilient to climate change. We've seen a lot of death in some of the different species around here. It's sad and it's bad, but it's happening. Just death of trees. So death, yeah, they're dying. And what's happening is we're seeing hotter, drier summers, right? We're feeling that it's happening. Get your air conditioner or whatever, because like it just statistically is happening. We're seeing hotter, dry, and then with that dryness and that heat is stressing the trees in a way that they were not adapted to. Like they've been living here where it's cooler in the summer with more water for like thousands of years since the last glaciation. But now things are changing, and it's putting so much stress on the trees. You can see it when you drive around. Go up Route 16 and look at the madrones. They look terrible. Look at the hemlock trees. They're all brown and crinkly, and look at the western red cedars. They're not doing well, and that is a result of climate change. And so what we're trying to do is try to manage for that as best we can. Different ways you can do that. There's also the problem of the land use history in our region, which is a lot of plantations, right? So there's this just Douglas fir monoculture plantations. And what happens is these trees are awesome. They grow super fast, and these are the trees that we use 2x4s and everything else you buy at Home Depot. Really important trees. Forestry is really important. But the problem is when we buy these and we want to turn these into good habitat, they're not healthy. If you look at the interior here, you're not going to see a lot of understory. There's no herbaceous level. That means that's not food. There's no food source in here. So animals can pass through here, but they're not able to eat it. There's no food for it, right? Little critters are not living in there. Like even like little mice are not there because there's no berries for them to eat, which means the coyotes and like the bobcats don't have any food, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is improve this habitat quality. And right now, this is overstock. So in an area like this, you might have 400, 500 trees per acre. And in a healthy old growth forest, which we don't really have any, you would have about 50 trees per acre. So about 1/10 the number of trees. And what you're looking for is something that looks more like this. And this is one of our preserves. So there's some areas we have that are really good still, but we buy lands that need improvement. So what we'll try to do, like this is an example of what, in a healthy old forest, you'll see a lot of downed trees, right? And this is habitat for insects and all kinds of animals, bears and stuff within these. You'll also see a mosaic of, you call it heterogeneity. So you got big trees, little trees, you got a whole bunch of different size classes of trees because they've just been growing there for so long. That's what you want to see. Not all those trees are all the exact same 42-year-old trees. That's not healthy. You also have weird growth forms on these things where critters hang out and jump down and eat each other and stuff. And then over there you have big snags. So just big dead trees. Those are essential habitat for all kinds of animals. You don't have those in those monoculture stands. So what we'll do is we go in and with help of some forest managers, like some we do it ourselves, but we also work with some foresters who do ecological forest management, like this guy in the middle of that picture wearing the vest. And we'll come up with a plan. So that picture that's on the left, those are, they say FMU, those are forest management units. And so each one of those little areas have a different habitat, they have different structure, different moisture regimes, soils are different. And so based on those differences, we'll come up with a way to manage each one of those parcels. And it takes a lot of work. And then we go in and we actually implement those. And what we try to do then is mimic natural disturbances, for instance, that create a healthy forest. So in this case, we'll cut down a bunch of trees, which I know is painful. Like, oh, you're like, oh, your conservation, you cut down a bunch of trees. Like, yeah, we do. And it is painful, but it's moving the forest back to a healthier position through cutting trees. It's what you got to do given the land use history of our region. You don't have to, you can just let it go, but it's going to take a hell of a lot longer to get where you want it to be. So this is another thing we can do. We'll create snags, bend trees, of course, and then so the picture with the guy at the hard hat, he's cutting the bark off the trees, not just the bark, but the cambium layer, that's the growth layer. So he's killing that tree, but he's going to let it stand. And that will create a snag, which will be habitat for, woodpeckers and everything that lives up there. So we've been killing hundreds of trees actually. And again, it's a weird thing to do, but we're murdering them left and right. And then we also create these fake logs that are just a bunch of dead trees that are piled up on top of each other and long. They're mimicking big trees that you would have found. And then we do these things called habitat piles, which are what they sound like. They're areas that all kinds of different critters can go into. So we create these things. They're kind of like Lincoln logs, make a little house for things, and things live in them, put game cameras on them, and they sure are being used. So that's a lot of work, costs a lot of money. Yeah, there's just more pictures of that. And one of the cool things we're doing now is to test and see whether this is working. We have wrote a grant, got some money from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. For those of you who like Kitsap Audubon, about like these guys are the pros. So got some money for these, and we put these things out on the land that are called audio moths. And so I'm not going to go into the details. I got a bunch of slides here. I won't move through it, but basically we're seeing if on those places where we did a treatment. So we cut some trees down, and right beside them, maybe an acre away, where we didn't do that treatment, is there a difference in the bird species that are using that? And we can see, also we put the audio moths out before we did the treatment. So you can see, is there a change over time? So statistically, we can quantify whether or not the habitat is improving or not. Maybe we're not actually helping it, but this is how we're going to determine that when it comes to birds. There's Dan Frolic, right? So
yeah,
that's it. So the way these audio moths work is a sonogram, so you can see the picture, and then if you haven't used this thing that it's called, like, go look up the Merlin app. Oh man, yeah, get the Merlin app. It's so much fun. Turn that thing on, you just sit there and look, and it'll keep telling you what birds are singing. It's amazing. Anyway, these are the data that just came out today. And I haven't even had a chance to look at them. It was right before I was like 4:59. I was about to leave and I got the email. And so these are preliminary. I have no idea, but basically you can see, you know, the plots. So we set these up on a whole bunch of different preserves. You see the number of species that were recorded at each one of those. And then you can see the control, which is the area we didn't do the treatment to. And then we can see the treatment. So you can see the differences. And again, I haven't even looked at these. I have no idea what these data say. I have any idea. I want to look at them, but now's not the time. And so another thing we're doing, and I'm going to move through this quick too, is assisted migration. So again, with climate change, we're seeing death of the trees that are living in our region. And so there's things called the genotype, right? So what we're doing here is we're moving the plants that live in Washington. So let's say you have a Douglas fir tree, and it's been here, and the cones keep falling, and there's generation after generation of trees that are growing here. They're being stressed because they're used to cooler summers with more water. But the same species of tree lives in Oregon, and the same species of tree live in California. And for thousands of years, it's been drier and hotter in the summer down there. So they're not different species, same species, but you go and you take the genotype, the seeds from Oregon and from California, and you bring that genotype up here, and you plant those up here. And what we're trying to do is see in a scientific way whether or not those genotypes perform better. And if they do, then one would logically think, well, we want these trees to live for hundreds of years. We're not going back in and harvesting them. So 500 years from now, are they going to be the same? Are they going to be alive if we plant the Washington trees? I don't know. Maybe it's better to plant the ones from California. So what we're doing is we're working with Western Washington to see with Janice Bauman, which is funny because where I went to grad school at Ohio University, this guy, Brian McCarthy, he was my advisor. He was her advisor. It's like small world. Anyway, yeah, and that's just a picture of what I was saying, like the sourcing areas for the trees. Then we basically did Doug fir, shore pine, and Gary oak. Those are the three species that we're doing the test on. You can see this happened down at Klingel, which is in Mason County. It's kind of near Belfair. And we planted hundreds of trees with those three different seed sources. Had to clear out a whole bunch of invasive, like blackberry, get the site selected and prepared, popped out all that Scotch broom, and then a bunch of volunteers came and put those things in. So that's how we get it done. And really what it comes down to is community and it's coming together and helping us get these things done. Important to mention that the history of conservation has not been equitable. These guys are some of my heroes. Teddy Roosevelt, John Muir. Love these guys. I grew up just idolizing them. I still do. But it's important to realize, like, some of these areas where are national parks. Well, there are people who live there and they got kicked off that land because we protected them. So national parks, amazing thing that America has done. It's not so simple as that, right? We actually move people off their historic land. So it's important to acknowledge that we can't do anything about the past, but as we move forward, we can be cognizant of that and try to do a better job. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be more inclusive, understand that we can be smarter and more thoughtful about the way we do conservation, especially when we're working with our tribal partners, but also working with folks who don't have a history of spending a lot of time in nature for a variety of reasons. That's where this Land Labs program comes in. And I don't want to go too long here. I don't know. I'm totally lost on time. You want to wrap this up?
Probably going to start the question part of it
at
about 10
Oh, that's long.
or 10 minutes.
All right, well, I'll move through it faster than that. Thank you, though. That's good. To move. Okay, so the Land Labs program, this is for underserved kids, and primarily, again, we write grants. We write grants all day. That thing at the beginning about at my keyboard, that's no joke. I spend most of the time just hammering at the keyboard. What this program does is it helps connect kids, in this case from Bremerton, particularly middle school kids, so Mountain View, right up here, with nature. So like kids have never been to the Hood Canal, for instance. They've never been 10-20 minutes across the water. They've never seen the Olympic Mountains and they live right here. It's unfortunate. So, and they don't know that environmental science is a career field. They don't know that they could do this stuff. So what we're trying to do is do some community science where the kids can help us collect data that we're doing anyway on these projects, very similar to what I'm just talking about. And by doing that, there's grade level, they're standards based. So the kids will help us collect data. We'll go back into the classroom with them. We'll help those kids analyze the data. And ideally through that process, they learn math, but really what they're doing is they're connecting to the land and they're realizing that there could be a future for them in post-secondary education, like going to college. Some kids really respond, some kids don't. We can't control that, but what we can do is give the kids an opportunity to care. And then it's up to them whether they care or not. I mean, that's it. So we do a lot of that. And again, that's all grant funding. We just got a No Child Left Side grant yesterday, $25,000 more. So yeah, and you can see some of these kids are helping me sort of girdle that tree over there, not doing a great job, but it's the theory that counts. Yeah, and so again, community engagement, getting people out on the land, and that means everybody. We do that in a lot of different ways. We have a conservation celebration coming up on June 1st. It's just that, and a whole bunch of walk and talks. So we do these free walks that are open to the public. Anybody can come. They're not conditioning walks, so we're not like hiking hard, but we do go slow. But the idea is they're about a mile and take about an hour and a half. So mostly what we're doing is teaching people about nature, trying to connect folks to nature.
How can we find out about these walk and talks?
They're all, yeah. How can you find out about the walk and talks? Everything's on our website. So go to our website is the core, like that's where we distribute information. Also, we have a newsletter, which you can sign up at our website. And that will, every one of them, you'll see what's coming up in the next month. And again, we don't charge for any of these things. We just want to connect people with nature. You want to become a member, do it. but yeah, we also have, like, every month we do a volunteer day every Wednesday. So I don't know which Wednesday it is, but once a month, quite frequently we do a volunteer day. So there's ways to get out and actually see the preserves. Like you said, some of them are not open to the public, but this is a way to get into the interior, some really crazy beautiful places. There's other things. I put this one up here because Newberry Woods Park is just not too far away. By Silverdale, we just bought a 200-acre parcel there near the park, and so it's not an expansion of the park. We own it. It's a community forest now. We need a group of people who care about that forest, become an advisory team, help us figure out how to manage it. So these are other ways that we're trying to encourage the public to get engaged and help us protect the land. Again, look at the date on this thing. I just threw this slide in here again, also at like 4:45. This is from 2 days ago. That's a bobcat that's just trouncing around in one of our preserves. So we just saw that. We have game cams that are just up all over the place. Yeah, isn't that cool? That bobcat just yeah, there's that 2 days ago. So that doesn't really fit in, but I just threw the slide in anyway because it's neat. And then, we work with a lot of different service groups in the area. So like Women's Giving Circle, Rotary Clubs, Kiwanis, Lions Club, etc. All important partners getting things done for conservation. Again, this slide doesn't really fit either, but we're a fiscal sponsor for 3 organizations. Hansville Greenway, we're associated with them. Friends of Miller Bay, we serve as their fiscal sponsor. And then Clear Creek Trail is actually part of GPC, although people don't know that. The Clear Creek Task Force is a special program of GPC. They operate autonomously. I will say, if you're interested in being more involved with the task force right now, we're recruiting some new people to come in June 1st in the morning at 9:30. We're going to be having a meeting and try to figure out, kind of like who's going to lead the task force moving forward. So a lot going on. Last slide. There's like one last, so I'm done. All right. Yeah. So this is where it's incumbent upon me as the director of the organization to say, membership's all important. We're not a quasi-governmental. We're not government. We're private, independent, nonprofit. The money that pays for all this to happen are membership contributions. And a lot of them are legacy contributions. So with the Legacy Society, what we do there is there's a little form you can fill out that says, I promise I'm going to give something in my will. It's my legacy. And through that, right now, one lady her name's Kit Ellis, she's given $20,000. And every single time we get one of those pieces of paper that come in from everybody, it could be, you say, I promise to give you $1 when I die. If you do that, it'll unlock $1,000 of her money and up to 20 people. And we've had 5 people do it so far this year. So we're looking at what the idea here is, we're incentivizing people to think about their legacy. They can fill the form out and give it to us, change your will. And then, you know, you can think about making a long-term, change for the better for conservation. All right. I'm stepping down off the fundraising thing. And what are we going to do next? Well, development pressure is still high, so we need to protect the land. So we still are actively working to protect land, but we're learning to be better stewards of the land through, all the climate resilient forestry and the science that we're doing more and more now. And also just connecting people through our programs. We do have an AmeriCorps program. Some young AmeriCorps people are just amazing, getting all kinds of stuff done. So that's it. Thank you. I guess it's time for some questions.
Nate, that was really amazing. First of all, you said that you have your master's of environmental science. And I think you said that you got it from Ohio University in Miami, Ohio.
It's close to Miami, it's Ohio, it's Athens, but yeah, Southeast Ohio.
Is there any place up here that you could recommend for people that have children, grandchildren who want to go into this kind of a program?
Mhm.
Can you recommend any place?
There's two that immediately come to mind. The University of Washington, of course, has the School for Environmental, it's called CEFS, Environmental Force. I don't know what it is, CEFS. What is it? Yeah, maybe that is. Anyway, University of Washington's got a good school. They're renowned. And then Evergreen College is really good too. Their whole thing is about doing forestry, and the people who are coming out of it now are not the traditional foresters. The plant monoculture, cut them down, plant monoculture. They have a different theory about it, because forestry is important, having timber is important. So, but having sustainable, healthy forests is really important. There's ways you can have both, and so that they would be great. There's a lot of other colleges. The state is really good for that. Yeah.
I thought maybe Western Washington had something.
Absolutely. Western Washington's good.
I noticed that there was 900,000 seemed an awful lot of money to give to that one place for just being conserving it, I think. Did anybody else think that was high? But
980,000.
well, yeah,
In fact.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us about the amount of money that you're spending?
Well, I mean, I would say our annual budget is 1.2 million, 1.3, somewhere right in there. And that goes, and the vast majority of that is staff, right? So 700,000. Our staff is 12 people. And we want to maintain good, solid folks. So we pay good living wages, and that's it. I mean, but that annual budget does not relate to our conservation budget, right? So any given year, like last year, seriously, $10 million is what we brought in to buy properties, but our budget, our operations, like 1.3-ish.
From the audience, are all of your protected lands open to the public? I think you answered that a little bit before, but
yeah, so we have 60 preserves. I'm thinking about half of those are open to the public, and the other half are open to the public through some very specific walks that we'll do. So we'll take people out. They're not really open all the time, every day. And a lot of that is because some of them are just not conducive to having people on them. They can be dangerous. Really, actually, it could be pretty dangerous because of the interior. So some of them are open to the public, some are not.
does anybody else here have a question? Yes.
I think you answered this. But do you do any political work to try to influence the legislature or the county commissioners or?
Yeah. So the question is, do we do any political work and try to influence council or elected? Yeah, no, so we do a little bit, and there's a lot of rules around 501c3s about how much you can do as for like lobbying. So, but I go down and talk to our legislators every year in Olympia when they're doing their section. I tell them about what our priorities are and what we think funding should be. Make sure there's still money in conservation, protect lands. When it comes to like the Growth Management Act or something. Yeah, exactly. When it comes to zoning and growth management act, we don't get into it really. And we do that purposefully because we have to work with we have to work with developers. We have to work with forest owners, like large timber companies. And, you know, it takes a long time to build trust with folks and you can lose trust really quickly. And so we don't get into that. Like there's other organizations that do a lot of the, and I would call it like, you know, more activism. That's not our lane, really.
Yes.
So
And then,
we mentioned at more or less at the beginning of the meeting about this Supreme Court case. What if the decision is that, how is the negative outcome of this decision would be what, or would happen?
Right, so the Supreme Court case that I mentioned earlier, that's Slevin versus EPA. If the Supreme Court determines that the right of the individual who owns the property owner is constitutionally more important than the Clean Water Act, the Clean Water Act would be essentially gutted. It would have no power, and that means if you got some, you got some wetland in your backyard, you can fill it in and build a house on it. It's like, you know, so it could be really bad. It may take a long time and there'd be other challenges. So like the thing's not going to happen right away, but it's a big risk. I mean, it's dangerous. It's crazy. Nobody's talking about it.
So.
Not yet, but we don't know. I mean, because the Supreme Court could very well say Clean Water Act trumps these people's claim that they can fill in their wetland.
But we know those. Don't believe.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. See, I don't know. It's just something to think about. All I'm saying is something to watch.
but there was a question over that way.
And I'm really struck by how closely you come off the road with the trail was right by somebody's house. How much mitigation do you do when you buy a property that close to somebody's residence?
Well, so yeah, the question was like, if you're in a place where the preserve is very close to a residence, you know, how do we deal with public access through those areas? And you know, we have in that particular case, you know, we try to have a good relationship with our neighbors. That's what it is. And those particular neighbors understand that, you know, we have an obligation on that particular property. You know, we want it to be open to the public. We want people to be able to get down there. And yeah, it goes right through there. But if they wanted to put a fence up, they could. They have the rights, they have the property line. They have chosen not to do that. And you know, really, for us, it's a good thing that they're there and they're watching. We like it, right? So, and I think, you know, every owner is different and people change over time, like literally, but every case is different. We have hundreds of neighbors, so we have hundreds of conversations every year with all of our neighbors, and they're all interesting. Yeah, no, yeah, should.
Yes, do you ever work with developers to either persuade them to mitigate their developments or able to talk them into some kind of an easement so that they're still not losing money?
Right. So that's a good question. So the question is, how do we work with developers? Can we kind of incentivize developers, I guess, to think about the, I guess sort of the ecological ramifications of development. And again, so what we do, a good example here is we will buy a piece of land from a developer because we want to protect it, or we'll put an easement on it. Under IRS rules, what we'll do is we will do what's called the yellow book appraisal. It's a high level appraisal. Those things cost like $10,000-$20,000 for an appraisal. It's not like just the appraisal you get on your house. It's a big deal. And then we have a review appraiser. So somebody else comes in, there's a fourth party, and so we come up with a fair market value for the property that the IRS will buy as legit, and everybody believes that it's legit. And then based on that, we'll try to raise that much money. But what the owners can do is they can give us a bargain sale, and a lot of times they will. So we just closed that the one that's up on Newberry, that was actually appraised at $4 million, but they sold it to us for 3.5. And so that $500,000 less than the value of the land, basically that's a donation to us. And so they can write that $500,000 off of their gross taxes over the course of 7 years. And caveat, I'm not a tax lawyer, so don't but that's what it is. Like you can write that off. So we work really closely, and that's a way for them to say, we do care, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is. Like we're not only going to sell it to you for fair market value, we're going to give you a bargain. Although that bargain, then they get to write that off their taxes. But that works for everybody. Yeah.
These are good questions. Any others right now? Well, then I think we're gonna thank Nate again.
Thank
And
you.
one last time, just remember to go to greatpeninsula.org to find out when we can do the next walks.
Come out.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.